Do you look in the sky a lot?
The following is a presentation of unidentified entertainment and 22nd century radio. Manassas, Fairfax, Washington, D.C.
Exopolitics and ufology, religion and science, time and space. Hosted by Mike Smith.
You're listening to Time and Space on 22nd Century Radio.
Welcome to the night bus, emergency transport for the stranded witch or wizard. My name is Stan Shuntbike and I will be your conductor for this evening. What you doing down there?
I fell over.
What you fell over for?
I didn't do it on purpose.
Well, come on then. Let's not wait for the grass to grow.
The following is a presentation of unidentified entertainment and 22nd century radio. Manassas, Fairfax, Washington, D.C.
Exopolitics and ufology, religion and science, time and space. Hosted by Mike Smith.
Find us on the internet, timeandspace.us, and Time and Space Radio Show on Facebook.
Do you look in the sky a lot?
Find us on the internet, timeandspace.us, and don't forget, download our free smartphone app.
That is the second time you've spoken out of turn, Miss Granger. Are you incapable of restraining yourself, or do you take pride in being an insufferable know-it-all?
He's got a point, you know.
You're listening to Time and Space on 22nd Century Radio.
I think we had a bad influence on her.
And now here's your host, the American picker of the conspiracy theory dumpster, Mike Smith.
You are brilliant, Hermione. Truly.
Actually, I'm highly logical, which allows me to look past extraneous detail and perceive clearly that which others overlook.
Yeah.
The other one that really jumps out that I'd like you to comment on is Hermione and her character. The connections and the I don't know, the subtle hints, just her initials HG, which are the on the periodic table, that's the abbreviation for Mercury. We get right back into alchemy again. What can you tell us about Hermione's character?
Well, I think there's also a long tradition in fantasy of women in powerful roles, and part of that, I think, is that particularly in times when there weren't as many opportunities in society for women as there are now, I think fantasy writers who were imagining other worlds often imagined worlds in which women had a lot more power, and one of the ways that they could exercise more power is by being magical, by being able to do things that were beyond ordinary human capabilities. That's certainly the case in the book Wise Child, which I mentioned to you earlier, with the little girl who's studying to be a Doran. I would say that is a sort of a feminist allegory. I think Hermione's a really interesting character because she starts out appearing to be sort of a know-it-all in the way that little girls who are really bright often get dismissed as being know-it-allish in a kind of annoying way. And yet very early in the Harry Potter series, when they have that episode with the troll in the bathroom in the first year, it becomes clear to Harry and Ron that Hermione will break rules out of loyalty to them, which is probably what she's doing in Gryffindor instead of Ravenclaw. In my middle school or Harry Potter class, we talk a lot about why Hermione didn't get sorted into Ravenclaw, and I think it's because her loyalty is even stronger than her intelligence. But I think Rowling really did a good job in making her a more complex character as the series goes along. I think Emma Watson grew in her acting ability as the series went along. And I think Hermione ultimately Hermione and Ron really are recognized for their strengths. And even though it seems like for a long time Ron really doesn't have any and everybody has to pull him along, I think both of those characters really emerge as worthy sidekicks for Harry. Hermione, obviously, in her intelligence. And the other thing I think that Rowling contributes in the character of Hermione to that threesome is a person who was born outside the wizarding culture, who doesn't know those folk tales, for example, that Dumbledore leaves to her in his will that become important in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. She's outside that culture, but she's done as much as she can to read up on it and learn about it before she ever arrives at Hogwarts, which in some ways makes her more useful to Harry even than Ron, because even though Ron has grown up in that wizarding culture, he's not studious. So he doesn't know those books, like the history of Hogwarts. And he doesn't recognize those names always when people say those names.
She points that out to him a couple of times, too. She actually kind of corners him and calls him on it, sure.
Which is a way of saying you've taken your own culture for granted. You don't really know it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's true.
I find it very interesting, too, that Hermione is by far the most accomplished and really most aggressive student, I think, that we're introduced to in the entire series. She's constantly reading and researching, and she really sets a great standard in that regard.
And I think there's a lot of Rowling in that character. I think Rowling is herself a person who loves learning. I think she majored in classics as an undergraduate, and I think her interest in texts and languages and words and that sort of thing really comes through in the Harry Potter series, in all those charms and spells that have Latin names, in names of characters. So I think that there's a lot of Rowling in Hermione, and I think she makes a concerted effort there to make clear what a wonderfully interesting person an intellectual can be if she isn't just dismissed as annoying because she knows more than everybody else.
Right. But it's also, I think, significant in the course right around the middle, and I'm sorry I can't reference them as quickly as you probably can, but I find it also very significant that at one point Dumbledore really entrusts Hermione when he gives her the time turner and allows her to... I found that to be an extremely significant moment in the entire story because there was finally that real galvanized connection between her and Dumbledore.
Yes, he allows her to break what is apparently a major rule of the wizarding world, that you can't turn back time. Yeah, and that is a big deal. You're right. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is my favorite book in the series.
It's an excellent book. It's probably my favorite movie, but definitely one of the best books too. That's right.
I think it may be the best edited. I mean, I love several of the later books, but the later books got so big and weighty, and I think there was probably pressure on Rowling to get the books out because of the whole commercial phenomenon. And I'm not sure all those books are as well edited as they could have been.
Right.
But anyway, I love Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and I think the significance of that is as important as you say, that Dumbledore entrusts her with that device which allows her to break a rule.
Yeah, that really caught my attention. Before I move to my next question, I just want to say, Mike, I know you're still there. You're probably just sitting there rubbing your dog's belly sitting on your couch. But
hey, how did you know, buddy? She's got the smile on her face. She's happy.
I'm sure she is. Usually Mike and I are sitting together in our studio, and it's very easy for us to kind of hand signal each other and everything. So I don't want to leave you out, Mike. If you've got a question or something, by all means, just chime right in.
No, I'm rolling with it.
And I'll tell a funny story just very quickly. First of all, Mike mentioned to me earlier, we had done another interview before this for a different part of the show. And he mentioned to me that he has yet to see the final movie and actually had not read the final book. So I was supposed to tip you off early on to please make sure that you don't necessarily spoil it for him so he still has a chance to get out. But I'll tell you.
I'll try not to do that.
Yeah.
No problem. All I need is a quick heads up. I'll take the headset off for 30 seconds or a minute. It's fine.
Okay.
The other thing that was funny to me, and I found this sort of significant, this really, as a child, I was definitely one of the Star Wars children that was just completely addicted to those movies and lost in that fantasy for several years. But you may vaguely remember my friend Howard, who was another student at Ferrum. Howard and I are still very good friends, and he works on the show with us. I was over at Howard's house just a couple of weeks ago, and I won't give you the backstory, but I had an excuse at one point to say to him and to his son is about maybe 11, 12 years old, I suppose. I said to him, this comment that he had made, this from the guy who has not read a single Harry Potter book and has never seen a single minute of the Harry Potter movies, to which his son exclaimed immediately, "What a huge fail," which I thought was terribly funny. But, I mean,
that is terribly funny.
It was very funny. I wish I'd had a recording of it, because the time was just priceless.
I'm taking that. I'm going to talk to him about it.
Yeah, exactly. But, the thing is, at this point, I mean, the hundreds of millions of copies of these books, I was going to ask you about what you thought maybe the legacy of these works is going to be, but before I get to that point, I mean, really, the impact of these books and movies at this point, it's actually rare. In fact, in Howard's case, probably extremely rare to even find anyone who's not been touched by these stories anymore. Would you agree with that?
I think I generally agree with it. I think my experience is that there are some young people, and I have a colleague whose son would fall into this category, who began reading the Harry Potter books when he was about the age Harry was in the first couple of books, and then got frustrated that he was aging a lot faster than Harry was, and the books were coming out kind of slowly, and stopped reading them. So I think there's still a non-Harry Potter reading contingent. I actually bought the first 2 Harry Potter books I ever bought for my own nephews, and they never read them. I mean, they turned out to be almost totally book-proof, so, it didn't work in their case. But I think the reach of the Harry Potter series is extraordinary. I think people will continue to read it for a long, long time, not just in terms of the literary phenomenon, but the pop culture phenomenon. I mean, I think there are more than 150 American colleges and universities with Quidditch teams now. There's an International Quidditch Association. It has a World Cup. It was in New York City last fall. There's Wizard Rock, this popular music that often is performed from the point of view of one of the characters in the Harry Potter series, like Harry and the Potters, or I think there's a group called Neville's Froggy Girl or something like that.
Right.
That whole phenomenon. Not to mention the wizarding world and all the merchandising opportunities and all that sort of thing. I asked my students this time in the summer enrichment program whether they thought their children would be reading the Harry Potter series. And one of those young men said, "I plan to duct tape it to their eyeballs." So, I think they feel about the importance of reading that the same way some people feel about the importance of having read the Bible. I mean, I think it's almost gospel to them, and I hope it isn't heresy to say that, but I think it is that important to them.
I'm sorry, if I can ask a question. Do you think that it rises to the level of, is it Tolkien-esque? I mean, is it going to, last the years? I mean, Tolkien's now on, I guess this would be generation 4 or 5 of readers.
Right. In my opinion, yes.
Yes. Okay. Because most people, I think, read that. Obviously, most people read those books for 50 years before they were made into movies, or 40 years.
Right.
Whereas,
and I think some really eminent. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just wondering if you think that the books will continue to be read 20 to 30 years down the road, or whether it will be more of a straight to the movies for the kids, whether they'll never read the books.
I think it'll always be straight. I think it'll always be straight to the movies for some people, but I think people who are readers will continue to read the books. And I think some really eminent literary critics have really embarrassed themselves by trying to say the opposite. There was a time when Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban was nominated for the Whitbread Prize in England, which is one of the, top literary prizes in England. And William Safire, who at the time was still writing for the New York Times, basically said, I can't believe anybody would nominate this book for a major literary award. It's a children's book. He was roundly criticized. I mean, by a lot of people who are children's literature experts and people like Stephen King, who are Harry Potter fans. Stephen King said recently in an interview, when he was asked to compare the Harry Potter series to the Twilight series, he said the Harry Potter series is an allegory of good and evil. Twilight is about boyfriends.
Well, do you think that the Kindle, do you think that the Kindle, being that it's, a digital media form, I guess, do you think that at some point that it's going to blur the lines between books and movies? I mean, at some point, are you going to be able to read the book and on the side be able to, hit something that brings up the scene from the movie? Do you think that eventually books and movies are going to kind of become one media?
Well, I think you could do that now if you were reading it on a computer screen, but no, I don't ever think they'll become one and the same. I mean, I think when you're reading a book, you'll always be reading words, and the images will be left to your imagination, and for me, that's the beauty of literature.
I agree.
But sure, I mean, I can imagine that time would come. It was interesting when I recently read about this Pottermore website that Rowling is launching in October, and I read the detail that the Harry Potter series would be available as ebooks for the first time. I was really surprised because it hadn't occurred to me that they have not been available as ebooks, but they haven't. And I think maybe that's the next immediate iteration of the Harry Potter series, because even those of us who have copies of all the books and have pages that are dog-eared and binding that is now cracked and peeling maybe. I mean, I think lots of people are going to want those ebooks on their Kindles or their Nooks or their iPods or their iPads or whatever. So I think that's part of the next iteration, but I don't see it ending anytime soon.
Good.
We're speaking to
I
Dr.
have a
Lana
child
Whited.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go
ahead. I was just going to say I have a child who literally learned English in part from listening to Harry Potter audiobooks.
Oh, wow. We're speaking to Dr. Lana Whited. She's a professor of English and journalism at Ferrum College in Virginia, and she's the editor of The Ivory Tower and Harry Potter, Perspectives on a Literary Phenomenon. I wanted to move over to sort of maybe a strange question, but if you bear with me, I have a very funny article that I dug up from the Telegraph in England that kind of illustrates what I'm talking about. The question I was going to ask was this, that I wonder if you've heard about or are aware of any sort of crossover or response from the so-called ufology community, the extraterrestrial type crowd. And I'll tell you why I'm asking that. This article from the Telegraph, it's very short, so just bear with me because it's worth reading the whole thing. It's just maybe 150 words tops here.
Okay.
It's from August of 2009, and it's about an owl crop circle that appeared in a place called Wiltshire Field. The article reads as follows. The 400-foot pattern, the latest in a string of bird-themed designs seen this summer, appeared overnight in a field in Woodborough Hill. While crop circle specialists are searching for a meaning, some are convinced it's a tribute to the teenage wizard. Steve Killick, a Harry Potter fan, said, quote, "It's very exciting to think that there are fans of Harry from other galaxies. Most of the world has fallen in love with Harry Potter, so it makes sense that most of the universe will eventually too. Rowling's 7-book series on the adventures of wizard in training Harry have sold over 400 million copies since the first title was released in 1997. Pattern expert Karen Alexander dismissed the claims, saying, quote, "The owl is an ancient symbol of wisdom, so perhaps it's a message to people that we should be thinking deeper about the world around us. It's obviously a time of upheaval in the world, so perhaps this is a sign that we should be looking backwards for some wisdom in how to deal with today's problems rather than anything to do with Harry Potter." Crop patterns caused fresh controversy that summer after a farmer in Wiltshire fired a shotgun over the heads of circle spotters. It's just interesting that Potter fans have no problem jumping to that type of thing, but while maybe the scientific community might be a little dismissive, I wonder about the paranormal, if you will, experts and particularly those ufology and extraterrestrial groups. We speak about those subjects on the show quite a bit, and I'm wondering if you've heard about or know of any crossover in that area.
You know, I don't. And I thought that I hadn't heard about this at all when you sent me the question until you mentioned the crop circle phenomenon.
Right.
And I do remember when that happened. But I kind of lost track of them. And I don't know whether there was ever any attempt to try to figure out what was going on with that. No, I really don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
But I think that comment, the desire to think that there are also Harry Potter fans in other galaxies is really interesting.
Yes, it is.
Now, Mike,
if they're out there, they would be Harry Potter fans.
That's right. That's right.
What you're saying actually reminds me of, there's a movie, I'm forgetting the name of it. I want to say it's called, The Fourth Kind. It's, about an investigation. I believe it's in Alaska, somewhere in the Northwest.
Nome, Alaska. That's right. I'm familiar with that.
And the image they keep seeing is an owl looking in their window. These people are having these reoccurring nightmares, and they're seeing this owl-shaped face, large eyes, very flat face, not a lot of features, small mouth. So I mean, you know, I think that's like an archetype that's been around forever, the owl, and it's, you know, it's kind of a creature of the night. It's dark. You see this thing swooping out of nowhere. You know, it's frightening. You know, I don't know about, I guess the whole wisdom. You know, it's about wisdom, but I don't know. It just,
I may misremember this too, but I think there may be some Native American symbolism about the association of owls with death.
There is, and there's also
ominous maybe there.
There's also a tremendous amount, and that's one of the things that made me bring up the whole extraterrestrial thing, because you really do get into a lot of the sort of interesting subsets of symbolism in the Potter series. The idea that there are shapeshifters, the idea that people can become animals and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Those types of themes are rampant in the extraterrestrial area of study, and are attributes that are actually attributed to ETs, to aliens, in their ability to visit humans, to interact with them. And the crossover, again, as going back to earlier in the interview, the crossover to me is a little bit hard to dismiss, that it may be very intentional. Now, I understand, as you just said, the Native American, for example, connection is probably a little more real world, if you will, but it's still there and hard to dismiss.
Was it was it a field of cannabis that they found this in? Or was it like a field of wheat? No?
Not that I'm aware of. I can't tell from the picture.
Just curious.
That's right. But they did nickname it the Hedwig crop circle. So.
Okay.
That's
all right.
funny. I think it was somewhere in Great Britain, but I may be wrong about that, and it may have happened in more than one place. I'm not sure.
Right.
But you mentioned that people's interest in extraterrestrials sometimes involves fear or sometimes provokes fear. One thing I think that the Harry Potter series does teach us is something about how to deal with fear. You know, in that episode in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, when Professor Lupin, who's the only Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher who really is, you know, worth his salt, when he teaches them to confront the boggart in the wardrobe, what he teaches them is that you have to confront your fears seriously, but also with a measure of humor. And I think sometimes with regard to the idea of extraterrestrials, I think sometimes that humor is lost. And people seem to approach that concern so seriously that then the rest of us have trouble taking this seriously.
That's an excellent point.
But
it's an excellent
I think
point.
anytime people are talking about their own fears, and those fears manifest themselves in creatures or extraterrestrials or whatever, I think that what that reveals about the person with the fear is always more interesting than whatever the fear is.
I would like to wrap up the hour, and I really, you know, personally and professionally, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. I wanted to finish with one more question I've stolen from another interview, but it was one of the most interesting that I had run across. Just as a footnote to it, first of all, are you aware of someone named John Granger? I think he runs.
Sure. I've met him. Yeah.
Have you really? Yeah, I wasn't sure what to make of him at first, but I read a couple of interviews with him, and he's a pretty interesting person. What can you tell me about him?
I met him at a Harry Potter conference in Florida that was called Nimbus 2003. Around the time my book came out, I was on a panel with a lot of other people who have written about Harry Potter. We could all sit in one room at that, and we were mostly people who had written academic-oriented books. I think he is a former Latin teacher or classics teacher or something like that. who has sort of made a career now of writing Harry Potter books and books about, I think he had several books predicting what would happen in subsequent volumes of the Harry Potter series. Obviously have to be written really quickly, and then I would imagine probably don't generate much interest once the next book comes out.
Sure.
But he's a very interesting guy and a very, very engaging speaker. I mean, he was one of the first people to be sort of in widespread demand on the Harry Potter conference circuit, because he just knows a lot of the references that Rowling uses. As I said, I think Rowling herself was a classics major. And, yeah, he's a very dynamic guy. I imagine it would be very interesting to be in his classes.
And it would have been very interesting to, if I could touch on Joseph Campbell just, very quickly again. That's another person I think it would have been very interesting to be able to get sort of some feedback from him on understanding some of the symbolism, at least from his perspective, on all those stories.
I absolutely agree. Yeah. I just wanted to tell you, I'm teaching my first class on Harry Potter this fall, and the topic of that class is Harry Potter and the Hero Myth. And so we're going to be talking about Joseph Campbell and Otto Rank and, others who have kind of identified the characteristics of the hero myth, which is certainly another of those traditions that the Harry Potter books are following in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the question, the reason I bring up...
that class.
I wish I was going to be in that class, actually. That would be very interesting. The reason I brought up Granger was because somebody asked him an interesting question. I will tell you after you have a chance to answer this, I'll tell you a little bit about what Granger's answer was, because it was kind of interesting. Have you, Dr. Whited, have you had any chance to communicate with Rowling in any way, shape, or form? Have you met her or maybe corresponded with her at all?
I have not corresponded with her, but there is an interesting story here. I have corresponded with one of her literary agents, a guy whose name escapes my mind at present. But when I was titling my book, I was thinking of calling it Harry Potter and the Ivory Tower. Neil Blair is his name, and he used to be an attorney for Warner Brothers. I was corresponding with him by email. He was working for the Christopher Little Agency, which is Rowling's literary representative, and so this is as close as I've gotten to Rowling herself. He wrote back to me to say that I couldn't call the book Harry Potter and the Ivory Tower, not so much because of any copyright issues, but because of what's called false designation of origin, that a person looking up titles, I guess on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, and seeing something called Harry Potter and the Ivory Tower might mistake it for a volume in the Harry Potter series. So not so much that Rowling had trademarked, that pattern for the title of the book. That's why I ended up calling it the Ivory Tower and Harry Potter. But I spent a week or more, maybe 2 weeks, talking with people like our library director and an intellectual property rights person at the Washington and Lee Law School, just about those issues and making sure I understand what he was saying to me. And he would send me these letters that were very pushy in that very polite way that only British people can be very pushy. I mean, it was always very, very polite and very, very threatening from a legal standpoint.
Right.
And I had visions of myself, on the Today Show being refereed by Katie Couric and arguing with these people about the title of my book. So I had that kind of limited experience, I guess. I am also extremely proud of the fact that most books about Harry Potter have at some point on the front or back cover a statement that says, this book is not authorized by J.K. Rowling, and I absolutely refuse to do that. Because it seems to me that anybody has a right to, to offer literary criticism, and that, nobody who wrote about William Faulkner ever had to do that. Nobody had to say this book is not authorized by William Faulkner. So,
right.
In fact, that man, Neil Blair, said to me in one of those emails, if anybody is going to offer criticism of the Harry Potter series, it would be Ms. Rowling herself. And I thought, well, how strange would that be, for a writer to offer the scholarship, the criticism on his or her own work. Anyway, I think he just had a misunderstanding of what literary scholarship is and what kind of book I was writing. And later on, a few years ago, Rowling was involved in this lawsuit against, I think it was the guy who does the Leaky Cauldron website, the issue of Harry Potter term, the rights to that. I think that's the kind of battle they thought that they would be fighting if I didn't back down. But, I think he just didn't understand what literary scholarship is. It was interesting correspondence, and as I say, that is as close as I got to Rowling herself. I have a feeling she probably never knows that those kinds of things go on, and she's probably busying herself with whatever she's thinking about writing and the fact that she has 3 children and, those kinds of things.
Right.
I imagine she is a very nice and terribly interesting woman. I mean, it seems to me that anybody who could offer up a series of this complexity, I think her brain must be a very interesting place.
I suppose I'd have to agree with that. Granger actually, in the interview I had read, pretty much had a similar experience, although I thought the thing that was interesting was that he mentioned at one point that some people on his behalf had sent copies of his books and various letters and things to Rowling, and even though she never responded directly to him, that he was then made aware of some sort of a television interview that she had done where she appeared to be answering a couple of those questions directly. They were almost verbatim from questions that his colleagues said they had sent to her. And so he sort of, half took it, a little tongue-in-cheek, I suppose, that she was maybe addressing some of those points. But, yeah, I agree with you that she's probably not really even aware of some of that stuff and shielded by her agents and various other people.
Yeah, I don't know. She is a person who has maintained a relatively low profile, except for a couple of interviews, one with Oprah Winfrey and one, I think, with the people who run the, I can't remember which Harry Potter website it is, but one of those websites did get an interview with her at one point, but it's very rare. I mean, she's not quite as reclusive as Harper Lee, who's notoriously reclusive, but she's pretty private.
Right. What is since you mentioned it, what did you say you said Harry Potter and the Hero Myth? That's the class you're going to be teaching in the fall?
Yeah.
And
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, what other works besides Joseph Campbell are you going to touch on in that?
Well, we're not going to read Joseph Campbell overtly. I mean, I like for students to come to their own conclusions about the kind of patterns they're seeing in the works that they read, but we certainly will use Campbell as a secondary source. We're going to read some other works in the Western hero tradition, like probably an excerpt from the Odyssey. We'll probably read Gilgamesh, which I believe is the oldest written story, at least in the Western world. We're going to read probably The Sword and the Stone. We'll read some Arthurian legend work. We aren't reading all the Harry Potter books. I'm actually expecting my students to have read all those before they come into the class, and I think that's quite an extensive prerequisite, but I think most of them will. We are going to read Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. And we're going to read probably a few other works featuring heroes. I might actually use the first book in the Hunger Games, which is a very contemporary series that I'm awfully interested in, partially because it has a female heroine. But we're just going to be talking about the hero in the Western world and what the patterns are, and especially works that diverge from those patterns in interesting ways. We're going to try to sort of identify the pattern of the hero. Harry has a lot in common with figures like Moses, for example, who are separated from their own families at birth and often raised by someone else and then alerted when they reach the age of early adolescence that they have this great destiny and that they'll have to work to achieve some quest. And I think Harry fits right into that tradition. So what I'm going to do is try to acquaint students with the tradition and then have us talk about how that applies to Harry Potter, and then I'm going to have them do some research on lots of other works that they want to look at, like maybe, I don't know, Robin Hood or, other works about various kinds of heroes, and then apply that pattern to those works. So I think it's going to be fun. I will say I've had more students contacting me over the summer about the reading list for this course than I ever have in the past. So I think there's a pretty high level of interest in it.
Right. I'm sure that there is at this point. That's great. Before I say thank you one last time for joining us, I want to make sure I'm not cutting Mike off if you have any last thoughts or questions, Mike.
Oh, no, I don't think you could keep me quiet if you wanted to. So
yeah,
I'm just fascinated. I'm sitting here taking notes. So
I was going to say the same thing because that's the funny thing. I could sit here and do this interview for 4 hours and probably never run out of questions and just keep going deeper and deeper into it. But those are the few I definitely wanted to touch on. And as the Harry legend continues to develop, Doctor, we'll probably get back in touch with you again and ask you a few follow-ups to this because, as I mentioned to you, there are a number of other guests where I can throw Harry's name into the mix. The one that comes to mind is a gentleman named Joseph Farrell that we interviewed last summer, who is an expert on, among other things, alchemy, Nicholas Flamel, and all these other connections. And at the time, I didn't actually ask him about Harry Potter, but I have another interview set up for him sometime probably in October, and was going to throw that out there. And just to bounce things back and forth, I'd love to get your feedback on whatever these various other experts and authors and researchers, what their responses are, and just get some comments from me. Yeah, I appreciate it. Listen, we really appreciate.
Maybe after you've seen the Harry Potter movie, we can talk about what you thought of it.
That's right. That's right. I of course own all the movies except the last one, and own all the books. My son has read all the books, and just to say that we enjoy them is obviously an understatement. We really, it's a big part of our family at this point. So
I'm going to have to start working on my collection again, actually, because I own all the books and movies too, but they're all getting to be kind of in sad shape.
Yeah, exactly.
I have 4 children now, so I think I'm going to have to work on my collection. Mike, I did want to mention, you were talking about popular culture in Harry Potter. It is interesting to note that Harry learns who Nicholas Flamel is in the first Harry Potter book because he gets him on one of those chocolate frog trading cards. And that's a great example of, not that there are chocolate frogs in the real world, but it's a great example of how children learn about things. Oh, who's this guy on my baseball card? That's how Nicholas Flamel enters the Harry Potter series.
That's very interesting. I didn't actually think of that, and as soon as you said it, I realized you're correct. Yes, that's right.
Yep.
That's right. And I think, a lot of people, Flamel's another interesting example because I'm not sure that everybody is aware that he was a real person or that he comes up in other areas of study. I think it's too easy to write some of these things off as just completely fictitious when in fact they're not. There's a lot of stuff that's grounded in the real world.
I think that's right, and I tried really hard to stress that point with my summer enrichment campers because a lot of what they would attribute to the imagination of J.K. Rowling, like, for example, the idea that a mandrake screams when you pull it out of the ground. I mean, a lot of Harry Potter readers probably aren't even aware that a mandrake is a real plant. And there is this legend going all the way back in British folklore that when you pull it out of the ground, it screams and you have to cover your ears or you might go insane. I mean, those kinds of details are the product of Rowling's research rather than her imagination. I think they're extensive, and I think people would be surprised how much of that is not made up.
Yeah, I think it's badly underestimated, actually. And again, you mentioned earlier, and I've seen in interview after interview that I have gone through in researching for this interview, the number of critics or people trying to comment on the series that unfortunately have no idea what they're talking about and didn't even bother to do a basic Google search that might have tipped them off. To the
but
reality.
There's so much to remember. I mean, working on my own book, I can't tell you how many times I called people who were 11 or 12 or 13 years old because I knew that they had read the Harry Potter series, enough times that they could remind me what Professor McGonagall teaches if I forgot, or, what the name of some obscure character is. That's one thing I like about, I've really enjoyed about this work too, that it really is a multi-generational kind of phenomenon.
Sure. Excellent. All right. Listen, we will let you go, and I just want to, again, say a personal and a professional thanks for joining us on the show. We've been speaking to Dr. Lana Whited from Ferrum College. She is the editor of The Ivory Tower and Harry Potter, Perspectives on a Literary Phenomenon. You can find that on barnesandnoble.com or amazon.com or in some cases at your local bookstore or library. Thank you again, Dr. Whited, for joining us. We definitely look forward to talking to you again, and good luck with that class in the fall. It sounds like it's going to be a very interesting one.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a real pleasure.
Brilliant.
Harry Potter. Who's Harry Potter?
Oh, no one. Bit of a tosser, really.
You're listening to Time and Space on 22nd Century Radio.
I've always admired your courage, Harry. But sometimes you can be really thick.
John is the owner of Soccer Post DC, and he's joining us today to talk to us a little bit about the store. John, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Mike.
What can you tell us about Soccer Post DC?
Soccer Post DC, we opened up about 3 months ago, and we are a franchise, which is a little bit unusual for soccer specialty. But what makes it unique is that being part of something bigger, we have better relationships and leverage with the big suppliers, Adidas, Nike, Under Armour, Diadora. So when I was looking into the business plan, it ended up being a no-brainer at the end to do a franchise. And the reception after just a short 3 months has been everything we expected. There's just so many players, both boys and girls, in the Fairfax area, and it's been very well received.
That's excellent. SoccerPostDC.com is your website. You guys are located in the Greenbrier Shopping Plaza out on Route 50 in Chantilly, behind the Dogfish Head Ale House.
Word.
Yeah, my friend Mike here has a big laugh when he's hearing that. I believe he spent some time at another one of their establishments recently. So,
oy vey.
That's good. When is the store open, and what are the best ways for people to find you and get in touch with you?
Yeah, we have a great website, which you just mentioned, which is soccerpostdc.com. Also friend us on Facebook, and what we're always trying to do is not only communicate in-store promotions for merchandise, but in-store events. We've already had a great one, which is we had 3 DC United soccer players in the store signing autographs and taking pictures, Chris Pontius, Ethan White, and Dax McCarty, before he got traded to New York.
Right.
And the best way to kind of keep current with us is that way, because we not only, again, want to sell product, but we also want to bring soccer to the community. So right now, we're trying to figure out a way to get a U.S. national women's team player to join us for an afternoon with the excitement that they created in the recent World Cup. And
Absolutely.
the best way to kind of stay current on what we got coming is Facebook or our website.
Excellent.
And I'm actually watching that site right now. I'm enjoying the goal of the day.
Yeah,
very nice.
We thought that was something that had people coming back on a daily basis. And then another thing that I think we're doing a little bit differently is every month we're going to have a raffle. So you got to come into the store at the Greenbrier on Route 50 and sign up to be part of each monthly raffle. So this month, we're giving away a $60 Adidas Addy Pure competition ball. And next month, we're thinking about giving away a Manchester United jersey. And the way to become eligible is come in during the month of August, and we do the drawing the first day of the following month. And we'll do something new every month.
Excellent. And, of course, we had been talking, you and I had been talking about trying to work something out. I have a smartphone app for our radio show, and we're currently pointing people to your store using our prize finder, and we're going to leave some gifts and prizes from the radio show there as well, and continue to try to work something out with that.
That's great. That's great.
What else do you have? I know that I saw we're not broadcasting live, of course, but we are putting this recording out there, and one thing I was impressed with was another event that's apparently going on today involving Mia Hamm what is that? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, what we try and do is, again, not only be a store, but also be a source of information, be it about, travel soccer opportunities, rec leagues in the area, but also soccer-related events that are going on in and around D.C. and its suburbs, but connected with last night's big game between Manchester United and Barcelona, which was kind of a rematch of the UEFA Championship. Mia Hamm's charitable organization at 11 o'clock this morning had a charity soccer match at the Castles Tennis Complex on the river.
Yep, sure.
And Mia and her husband Nomar Garcia-Parra and Kobe Bryant came in, and a number of other celebrities, and they kind of played in a kind of a celebrity soccer match this morning. So D.C. is definitely a hotbed for soccer, and it's attracting a lot of attention, and that was a very recent event this weekend. Again, that we advertised on our website and Facebook, and we'll kind of keep the community apprised of future events.
You got to tell me about Kobe Bryant playing soccer. That's not one I ever would have put out there. Was he actually out there playing?
My daughter swam in an all-star swim meet this morning, so I wasn't able to attend myself. I know he was a late addition, but I think I'd put Kobe in any position. Maybe start him in goal. I think it'd be pretty tough to get a ball by him.
That's right.
And then maybe if they start off strong, put him up top and maybe serve some head balls to him.
No kidding. That's
right?
a good call
Well,
right
if
there.
you film, I don't see anybody being able to defend them.
Not really. Not really. That would be a handful for just about anybody. That's right.
That's right.
How about
That's right.
Soccer Post DC is open 7 days a week. You can reach them at 703-817-1110. And we're talking to John Reeves, the owner of the store, and we're certainly want to congratulate you on your early success with the store. I've got a couple of interesting points that I thought of that I wanted to just mention real quick. Mike and I were talking yesterday, and he, referencing, obviously, for those of us that are familiar with the stores in the Northern Virginia area, he asked me very quickly if you sold any rugby gear, which I assume that you do not. You probably can guess which other store he's referring to. But it did make me think of something that I thought was sort of curious about soccer in the United States. Let me throw this idea out there and get you to comment on it real quick.
Sure.
You know, it's interesting, especially in the D.C. area, that there are a handful of soccer stores, you know, some of them over the decades that I've been playing, and I'm sure you've been around the sport. We've seen a couple of them come and go, and a couple others have been there for a long time. But what's really interesting is that when you stop and think about the other sports that are supposedly so much more popular in the United States, at least from a television point of view, or, you know, we're talking about the NFL, the NBA, when you stop and think about it, there are no specialty stores for those sports. There is no basketball-only equipment store that you can go to. There is no football-only equipment store. I can't think of one example of anything like that. And I'm wondering if you could just comment on that and talk about what it's like to have sort of what some people might consider a specialty store like that.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. You know, it's never, to be quite honest with you, dawned on me. And, you know, maybe just top of mind, soccer cleats and the focus on the shoe is what drives the heart of any soccer specialty store. And even though you look at a pair of cleats that might run you between $100 and, believe it or not, these days $300.
Yeah, right.
It's really the only piece of equipment that you have to invest in. And I think what happens is your bigger boxes aren't willing on the soccer front to, you know, take a run at what's going to be popular at that price point. So they tend to stock just kind of your basic vanilla, and we like to brag to say, hey, where the big boxes end with their inventory and service is where we start, because it is very special. They're technical. It's not unusual for us to spend a half hour to 45 minutes with a player making sure that they walk out of the store with the best shoe, because it really could have an impact, positive or negative, on their game.
Sure it could.
So we definitely see almost .com being more of a competitor than Big Box for those reasons, but I see more benefits in .com than negatives, because they continue to remind the player and the team that there's new and exciting product out there. And we stock it locally. Again, for the fit and the customer service, it's very difficult to make that $200 to $300 purchase decision online. Just one example is we had a kid come in looking at a high-end pair of shoes, thought he knew exactly what he wanted, size 7. In fact, he left with those shoes, but one size 7 in the exact same style and brand fit him slightly differently than the other, and that made all the difference in the world. So we're definitely creating a very loyal following with a wonderful selection focused right now on Adidas and Nike.
I know that you and I both have sons in the youth soccer system here in the DC area, and I have experienced exactly what you're talking about. My son needed a new pair of shoes a few months back and had something that he liked that he had seen, and we ended up walking out of another store up in Maryland with not only a different brand of shoe, but a completely different size. And after doing some research online, I mean, you really have to pay attention to some manufacturers run a little large or a little small. Some, run a little wider than others. And, I don't know if there's another sport where, as you say, the footwear in particular is driving the business as much as it is with soccer.
Well, if
it's
I can
amazing how It's so very different. You really gotta come and try them on. And we're well staffed, starting with me. You know, I played college soccer and I've been involved with it my whole life. My dad was a coach, athletic director, etc. And I only hire individuals who have, you know, a similar knowledge base. So it does take a little while around a special product, and we make sure that we treat every player just like that.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, well, I just, you know, I think just listening to you two gentlemen talk about it, it's kind of, it's something that most other sports in the U.S., I know that I experienced it with rugby, most other sports, your parents know the sport. So when you're going to go out and shop for equipment, if you're going to get pads for football or a baseball mitt or whatever, chances are your dad played it, your uncle played it, somebody played it with you, somebody played it that can go with you. I think now you have a younger generation that, you know, their parents may enjoy getting them involved in soccer, but that doesn't necessarily mean that their parents have played it and really have any kind of knowledge base about the products. And like you're saying, I'm not going to go to Sports Authority and buy a pair of boots to go out and play rugby or soccer. I'm going to go to a specialty store where I can find someone that's got the experience and got the knowledge so that I can get, you know, what's going to work for me. Whereas, you know, the major sports, what we would consider major sports, you know, everybody's played them. So we've all got our idea of what's best, you know, whether it's Rawlings or, you know, whatever.
You bring up a good point where, you know, the big box has its pros and cons, but it's tough to find that person to help you. Where you come into our store, and it's not unusual, to your point, for a mom and a dad to entrust us. It starts with an education, and we tend to spend some time just talking about what we have from top to bottom, and then we don't even measure a foot the old traditional way, because every shoe is different. We just start bringing out boxes and see what feels right. And there's a certain amount of knowledge that they're looking for, because to your point, many don't have it coming into our store, but they certainly leave with it.
That's great.
Excellent.
And just another point where we were just talking briefly is we're not only selling to the player, but half of our business is selling to the club. So we will sell jerseys and equipment and balls, etc., to clubs and teams and coaches. So we service the whole gamut of the soccer community.
And really, true or false, but this is something I've taken for granted for many years. I mean, Northern Virginia in particular, and definitely Southern Maryland, suburban Washington, is clearly one of the hottest regions in the entire United States for soccer, both youth and even professionally now. Isn't that really the case?
Oh yeah, it's a hotbed. And when we were looking into open up this store, you know, I have a little bit of a real estate background, and before buying a piece of property, you research the demographics and this, that, and the other thing. Not only is the state of Virginia a hotbed, you know, driven by its attention and past focus to soccer, but also its, you know, number of young, affluent families. The amount of soccer energy and games being played on a daily basis, and it's a 365-day-a-year sport. It has really just been an early success, and we just anticipate doing nothing but building upon it.
That's excellent. We're talking to John Reeves. He's the owner of Soccer Post DC. Visit him at soccerpostdc.com. You can reach him at 703-817-1110. They're located in the Greenbrier Shopping Center in Chantilly, Virginia. Just a couple quick news items, John, and we'll let you go. I just wanted to ask, first of all, if you watched or was following the DC United match last night. They got a nice win on the road out there in San Jose.
About time.
Yeah.
Also, I know, as you referenced earlier, the Barcelona Man U match yesterday. I didn't actually see any of it or get any of the result. Can you tell me anything about that? Did you go to the match?
I needed to watch it on TV. I didn't go. That match, it just speaks to the growth of popularity of soccer. They sold over 80,000 tickets to that game, most of them within hours of when they were made available to the public.
Wow.
It was the largest crowd ever to watch a soccer game at FedEx. So it wasn't at RFK, which is smaller. It was at FedEx, and they packed it. And Manchester United beat Barcelona 2-1 to kind of avenge their UEFA Championship loss to Barcelona a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
And just some of the biggest names in the sport were on display last night. So just the fact that 80,000 people bought and went to that game, it just created a buzz around our store, a buzz around soccer, and truly it's a sport that just, the sky's the limit. And it all starts kind of at the youth level, which has been building for years. The MLS is as strong as it's ever been. You kind of started your question with DC United. I love the choice that they made, hiring Ben Olsen as their coach. You know, I really think in his first season, he's brought a whole lot of energy and quality play to the field. And the more success that they have on the field, the more fans that it's going to bring. And, you know, it's going to be like the olden days when I was growing up playing Little League soccer and Little League baseball. You kind of looked up to, who do I want to be on the field when I grow up? I kind of have the Cosmos, and this generation's going to have DC United.
Right.
And it's great to have a major league soccer program again that keeps the kids engaged in what, if I keep practicing and getting better, you know, what can I achieve? I can achieve being a professional soccer player. And it's really a cool time to be a soccer player in the United States.
Now, speaking of energizing, go ahead, John.
I was just going to say the other big news item is, you know, Bob Bradley just.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yep, Klinsmann from Germany, a tremendous player in his time, just took over the U.S. program. Where I really think Bob Bradley, over his tenure, did a whole lot more good than bad. You know, we had a great showing in the recent World Cup. An unfortunate loss to Ghana in extra time. But Klinsmann will bring an international kind of cross-pollination to the sport. And I think we're going to see from where Bob Bradley has brought it, which is much higher than where it was 5 years ago. I'm very optimistic that Klinsmann is the right choice to take it even further.
Well, let's hope that he gets some big, strong midfielders in there, so we can compete with the Europeans and the and Ghana. I'm tired of watching our 5'8" guys get knocked off the ball. Every time we play
I think
anybody big.
If anything, I think where we've improved is the creativity up top. We've created a lot more scoring opportunities for us against some of the best teams. But the midfield and the back is, I think, our next step. And then we'll
if we can get some more balls on net.
Yeah. So it's an interesting time for U.S. soccer, but it's I think it's definitely on the rise.
Yeah. Definitely. Excellent. All right, John, I appreciate your time. SoccerPostDC.com. You can friend them on Facebook by looking for SoccerPost DC. The store is in Chantilly, Virginia, in the Greenbrier Shopping Plaza. And John, thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to continuing to sort of partner with you and keep an eye on the store. And I'll definitely be getting out there to visit as soon as I get back from this trip. And we'll talk to you more about some of the stuff we were going to try to do. We were even kicking around the idea of doing a live show out there, just to kind of not only help promote, but kind of keep out and mobile. And we just love doing this show and have a lot of fun. Doing different things, doing creative, sort of outside the box stuff with it. So
that's great, and we're open to it because, and it's part of the, two teams that we support right now. We are the exclusive supplier to George Mason University, which is the only Division I program in town.
Right.
And we also just picked up a large travel program, Herndon Travel Soccer. So we're the exclusive supplier for them.
That's
when
great.
I got into this business, one thing I wanted to do is not be a two-dimensional store, meaning, I'm flat, I open, and you come in and buy shoes, which is clearly something we want to do and be successful at. But it's also that third dimension of doing the player appearances, the community outreach, and to do a show with you guys would bring energy to the store because we're a store plus. And we really want to be an outlet for everything soccer in the D.C. area.
Avada Kedavra.
This is Time and Space, hosted by Mike Smith.
Why is it when something happens, it is always you three?
Believe me, Professor, I've been asking myself the same question for 6 years.
Find us on the internet, timeandspace.us, and Time and Space Radio Show on Facebook.
Soccer Post DC is where the big box ends and service and expertise begin. Find the soccer gear you need from Nike, Under Armour, Adidas, and Diadora. Located on Route 50 in Chantilly, Virginia at the Greenbrier Shopping Plaza. Soccer Post DC, 703-817-1110. Open 7 days a week. Visit soccerpostdc.com and find them on Facebook. Exclusive supplier to Herndon Travel and the George Mason University Patriots. Soccer Post DC.